In my last video, link in the description, I make a Eurorack case with my own custom power strips. In this video, I go over how to hook up those strips, which should be generally useful information, and how to build my power strips, available from the link in the description below. I'm going to go over how to wire up power strips from an absolute beginner's perspective, so if you only want to watch the build part of this video, please skip ahead. If any of us plan to have a synth with more than one module, we need a way to get power from a power supply to some kind of distribution system. In the case of Eurorack modular synthesizers, this distribution system is strips of 16-pin connectors for ribbon cable. These provide negative 12 volts ground and positive 12 volts at a minimum, and depending on the power supply used, positive 5 volts. There are also connections for CV and trigger to be shared by all the modules connected to the same power strip. And if you have multiple power strips, power can be chained from one strip to the next. Wiring multiple power strips directly back to the outputs of the power supply is also a perfectly fine way of doing things, as well as using power pass-through terminals if they are present on your power strips. CV and trigger can also be passed between power strips if this is useful to you, and in the case of my power strips, the switch for the underside LEDs can be wired up like this. Only one switch is needed for up to a half a dozen power strips. Now for the build on my take on a Eurorack power strip. Let's start with the schematic. Even though it looks like a lot, it's really just a few simple circuit elements repeated over and over. To start, connections for the power supply are here, power presence indicating LEDs. Note the resistor values were chosen so that the 12 volt rails and the 5 volt rail have roughly the same brightness. Filtering caps, CV and trigger to other power strips, along with the switch connections to the underside LEDs. The underside LEDs themselves, when using red LEDs on a 5 volt supply, you can have two LEDs in series. This is a more efficient use of current than having an individual resistor for each LED, and the 16-pin Eurorack power connections themselves. Now let's put one together. Anytime I do a build like this, I try to go from the shortest part to the tallest. That way you can use your work surface to hold things in place while soldering them. With that said, the first component is of two 10 kilo ohm resistors. Followed by the 4.7 kilo ohm resistor. Then the three LEDs for power presence indication. Note that the red side of the LEDs is the cathode, and it should be oriented to the pad closest to the C marked on the circuit board. For those of you using your own LEDs, see your datasheet for correct orientation. Next, if you're building the power strips with the underside LEDs option, the 7 100 ohm resistors on the top side are next. Then flip the board over, and the 14 LEDs are soldered to the underside. Note the orientation of the cathode towards the C. After this is done, the 16-pin connectors can be added. The notch on the connector should match up with the number 16 on the PCB. Then the wire terminals can be added. Make sure that the wire ports face out away from the PCB, or you'll have a rough time connecting the wires. The final and tallest component are the 3 power filtering capacitors. Note that the long leg on the capacitor goes through the hole by the plus sign, and the stripe on all the capacitors should be facing the same direction. And there you have it, a complete power strip. When you're installing this power strip in your case, make sure there is a standoff under each of the 6 screw holes before screwing the power strip down. Well, I hope you all found this video informative on how to use power distribution strips for your Eurorack synthesizer, and for those of you interested in a power strip kit, how one of my power strips goes together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.